Well, greetings everybody. I hope this spring day finds it well with your soul and that life is full and enjoyable for you. I just wanted to, thanks for joining me, and just wanted to share some thoughts today in this little message, thinking about discernment and the will of God, following on from last week where we talked about wisdom, mysterious wisdom and discernment. But one of the things that I touched on was that I think that discerning the will of God is one of the biggest challenges that as leaders, as Christian leaders, we face. But not only as Christian leaders, I think as just Christians in general, the challenge of actually discerning God's will is a perennial one for all of us as Christians and believers. And so whether it's as a husband or a father or a friend or a pastor or a leader, I just find myself wanting to make sure that I'm walking in the will of God. And it's an incredible wrestle at times to actually discern what the will of God is. I don't know about you, but have you ever thought, God, why don't you just tell me what to do and I'll do it? That'd be really easy. But to actually wrestle it through then is part of the relational dynamic that we actually get to enter into and to enjoy. And we're not alone in this, because Jesus actually obviously set the benchmark for this in how to do it. And I love that prayer in Luke 22 verse 42. In the Passion Translation, it says it this way: Father, if you are willing, take this cup of agony away from me, but no matter what, your will must be mine. And I want to encourage you today to have a no matter what kind of resolve about seeking the will of God for your life. It becomes part of the adventure and the challenge. So how do we discern God's will? We're actually told that we're to be transformed, and that's part of the discerning process. And you can read about that in Romans 12, verse 2. But though in the world, a discerning person is one who has good taste, a good eye. They judge well and wisely. They're discerners of art, food, or wine, for example, the finer things in life. Discernment in common usage is the ability to judge wisely and be able to choose carefully among many choices. And as Christians, we find ourselves confronted with choices at times, and wanting to get the heart of God for those choices becomes very challenging. So for Christians, however, spiritual discernment means something much, much more than just having a discernment of the finer things of life. I think discernment for us, spiritual discernment, is the art of prayerful decision making that uses specific spiritual practices to discern the will of God. The decisions we make as Christian leaders, or as just Christians generally, has the potential to impact hundreds of lives around our world. And if you're an influential leader, it can even be thousands or more. And so it's vital to become well acquainted with the way of discernment. One of the leading lights, if you like, in the discernment process was a 16th century Spanish Catholic priest and theologian called Ignatius. And he was renowned for his wisdom and on the topic of discernment. Discernment for Ignatius means being aware that God wants us to make good decisions, that God will help us make good decisions, but that we are often moved by competing forces, ones that pull us toward God and ones that push us away from God. Anyone who has ever made any important decision knows this experience. You feel pushed and pulled on a variety of inner forces. Selfish versus generous motives, free versus unfree motives, healthy versus unhealthy motives. All of these can contribute to the tension around discerning the will of God. So discernment is the ability to clearly see what those forces are and to be able to identify, weigh, and judge them, and finally to choose the path most in line with God's desires and will for you. Thus, it is not simply as simple as blindly following certain rules and regulations. Needless to say, the Bible's teaching is essential to shaping our thinking, but it's way more than just yes, no, or this way or the highway or anything like that. And in times of complexity, we've got to be able to rely on God's promptings that we're listening to and the activity of God as He speaks to our heart and our spirit inside of us. One of the ways that Ignatius actually invites us into to do this is what he calls indifference. Indifference is the ability to step back from the decision and be detached from one's own biases. So it's the willingness to carefully balance all the alternatives and to approach the decision-making process as impartially as possible. When you come to making a decision, have you ever just gone to seek counsel or talk about it with somebody, and you know that you'll go to the person that will tell you what you want to hear, that will actually reinforce your perspective? You don't want to go to somebody who's going to tell you something different, because that makes it more complicated. And so we have this phenomenon that the psychologists call confirmation bias. We actually go to somebody or a situation that will confirm what this hidden agenda inside of our heart. Confirmation bias is the tendency we all have to look for information or arguments that support what we already believe and the reasons that support what we are already inclined to do. That was a statement made by Andy Stanley in his latest book, Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets, which I recommend to you. And so I think the challenge to be indifferent is to be in this place of absolute surrender, laying down our agendas and our choices and our preferences, so that no matter what, we are actually able to pursue the will of God. And my encouragement to you is to maybe have a resolve in your spirit that there is a no matter what, that we will obey God and his leading and his prompting. So can I suggest that you maybe embrace the concept of indifference, holding loosely, holding lightly, and having that resolve of Jesus that no matter what, we will pursue the will of God. God bless you, and enjoy your discernment processes moving forward, and look forward to catching up with you again soon. Bless you. Bye.